This is Dr. Andrea Ghez, and she is only the fourth woman in history to win a Nobel Prize in physics. She won it for her discovery of a supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy. But being super smart wasn't enough. Her first proposal for telescope time was declined. In her own words, "To me it was so obvious that it was such a good idea. I realized when you're trying to convince a group of people to do something that hasn't been done before, just because you think it's a good idea, that doesn't mean they're going to accept it." So I call this episode The Sin of a Decline. Hi, this is Jeff Goldfinger. Welcome to the STEM Signal, where we help the STEM educated enhance their career signal above the workplace noise. In our last episode, we talked about this book called Understanding Computers and Cognition, co-authored by Terry Winograd on the left and Fernando Flores in the middle. The two of them discussed what they called a basic conversation for action and the 9 stages of such a conversation. These conversations happen in our workplace every day, and we went through each of the 9 stages. You'll find a link for that episode in the description box below. But today I want to focus on a decline. What happens when your request or offer to your boss is declined? What now? So what I call the sin of a decline is a diagnostic tool. And so whenever you see I use capital letters, that is a signal that I'm using a mnemonic, a memory tool. So let's look at how we spell sin. The first letter is called the situation. The situation that somebody is in might not be appropriate. Here's a current example based on something that just happened in the marketplace 2 days ago.
The second biggest bank collapse in U.S. history. Federal regulators shockingly shuttered Silicon Valley Bank Friday. Following the bank's demise, the CEO acknowledged it has been an incredibly difficult 48 hours.
If you have a request or an offer for an individual or a company that's been adversely affected by this situation, probably not a good time. But situations change. And the thing to note about a situation is that offers that are declined today might be accepted in the future. So the idea is not to totally give up, but recognize that the decline is situational dependent. All right, so that's our first letter. The second letter is the individual. What about the individual? Well, there's 3 types of individuals. The first type of individual is somebody who doesn't want any help. They're what's classically called a lone ranger, or just somebody who thinks they can do it all by themselves and doesn't want or doesn't need your help. My former mentor, Toby Hecht, calls that a plus self, somebody who doesn't want your help. Okay, what other kind of individuals do we have?
Hey folks, here's a story about Minnie the Moocher.
As Cab Calloway would say, Minnie the Moocher. So what's a moocher? A moocher is somebody who is always taking from you. They know they need help, but they're unwilling to obligate back in return. Essentially, they want to take without giving back. So I'll tell you a story that happened to me early in my career. I had just retired from the Navy. I was working as a consultant for a small systems engineering company, and I got hired out by them to consult for a much larger company that was trying to introduce a platform into the US. And they hired me to help them. I had some expertise in the particular domain of action. And what I noticed over time was my point of contact at the company was every week or so, he would call me up and say, "Hey, Jeff, I got a quick question for you." And it was one of these things where he'd stay on the phone with me for 5, 7, 8 minutes, something so short that I felt guilty charging him for my time. But I noticed that he was doing this a lot, that all these 10 minutes here and 10 minutes there would add up over time, and my company and me, we were losing out on being able to bill for that time. And so I eventually stopped doing that with him. He got the message, and he was willing to allow me to be on the clock, if you will, in all of our future calls that he had. All right, so that type of person is called a zero self. somebody who wants to take but doesn't want to obligate in return. Okay, the last kind of individual we find is typically in a startup situation where the founder or CEO of a startup, they know they need help to grow the company and they're willing to obligate in return, either by pay or by shares in the company or skin in the game, as it will, right? So they're obligating in return for all the good help they need in scaling up the company, okay? And CEOs and founders of startups aren't the only people who are in this category. There's all kinds of people that are what are called minus self, okay? So minus being they're missing something, they know they're missing something, and they're willing to obligate in return, okay? Either through monetary remuneration or some other way of giving back. Okay, so to keep your STEM signal the highest, you want to avoid plus selves, you want to tolerate zero selves, but not forever, and you want to gravitate towards minus selves. Those are the people going to help you with your STEM signal the most. Okay, so that takes care of the situation and the individual. The N in the sin of a decline is the narrative. So for that, let's go back to Dr. Gez and see the rest of the story. So if we read her interview with Lois Lerner of the University of Chicago News, the next two sentences read, "So it forced me to articulate the science better. That's the opportunity, figure out what they didn't like and strengthen the argument." That's the narrative portion. Again, she did not give up. She diagnosed the sin of her decline and looked at it and said, okay, it's not the situation. The telescope is there. I know what it cost. All of that is addressed. The individual, which happened to be a committee that she was applying to, they are all minus selves. They know they need the help to discover these kinds of things. It was her narrative that was off. She fixed the narrative, went on to win her Nobel Prize some number of years later. All right, so that's why I use this as a diagnostic tool whenever you're declined. Instead of just walking away with your head hung low, use it as a diagnostic to figure out what to do better. And oh, by the way, sometimes it's with the same individual, like the case of Dr. Gez. She went back to the committee with an upgraded offer, and it was accepted this time. Sometimes you realize, again, if you got the wrong individual, if this is a plus self, okay, you walk away, you learned your lesson, so the next time you can make a more powerful offer to a minus self. So the point of using this as a diagnostic tool is to know when to go back and return and make your offer again and not just give up. Okay, thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. If you found this content valuable, like and subscribe, of course. But better yet, please forward this to your friends, somebody you care about who you think might also find this valuable. That'll increase your STEM signal. So again, thank you for listening. And until next time, keep your signal above the workplace noise. Let's get down.